everyone. So happy to have you guys here. We are just talking about this wonderful book here in my grandmother's house, Black Women, Faith, and the Stories We Inherit. It's by Dr. Yolanda Pierce. And we are so happy to let you guys know that she will be doing a question and answer with us this Saturday at 4 p.m. It's on Zoom. The link will be in Lyrical Assembly's bio. It's going to be a great event. We also have the poetic activist doing spoken word in the beginning and at the end of the event. So it'll be really great. We just wanted to come on and kind of give a overview of what Sacred Sounds events look like, as well as who Lyrical Assembly is. So Shannon, could you tell us who Lyrical Assembly is?
Yeah, Lyrical Assembly is a organization of various people, and right now what we've been doing is we've been meeting every Saturday, and we have a book club called Reads for Resistance. And out of those book clubs, we usually try to get the author to come and do a closing out event for us to have a Q&A with them. So for our first Sacred Sounds event, we had Dr. Randy Woodley. We had read a book that he wrote from his perspective as an Indigenous theologian. And then after that, we read The Asian American Reckoning by Kathy Park Hong. And that was a good event too. We've had 2 so far. So this is like, I think, a series that we want to try and keep up with. Yeah, so Lyrical Assembly is expanding our events, I suppose. They're all virtual right now. The last like in-person event we had was Montel Fish. Yeah, that was, we had that. We had him for a whole weekend, but yeah.
Yeah, so if you guys haven't heard about this book, it just came out this February. She's also the Dean of Theology at Howard University in Washington, D.C. So we're actually really excited we were able to get her booked for this. I want to give you guys kind of like an overview what she talks about, and also if you guys have if you've read it or have any experience with her, go ahead and type a question that you want us to ask her. So because an answer. So if you guys have a question for her, we would love to get that.
Oh, we have a Howard alumni?
HU, you know. So I'm really excited. I was like, yes. And she's a womanist theologian. So what that just means is it's different than feminist. Feminist kind of just cares about gender issues, but womanist cares about the intersectionality of being a woman. And so womanist is coined by Alice Walker. And it just talks about the different ways that women kind of have discrimination happening to them. So it's like gender, it's
race,
societal, all of those things. So if you guys like, I'm going to, the book is really good. It's a short read. And what I love about this book is that she doesn't really offer answers, right? She kind of just gives you her understanding of what has happened, her experiences. And I love that also growing up in the Black church, there's a lot of tradition in that, and there's a lot of goodness, right? There's a lot of greatness in that, but there's also a lot of, I would say, that's in the book and said, well, it's like a lot of patriarchy and deep-rooted kind of white supremacy values as well. So it's really good to see someone else express those things in a really amazing way.
Yeah, I like that how she her stories are a lot of her observations from her life. Like I feel like it's a lot of reflection with feeling, and then also from like an intellectual perspective. Just she put a lot of like thought. I was reading about in the last few chapters when she was talking about gratitude and being on the giving and receiving end of gratitude, and like she described it very perfectly, I think, like how you, if you are a receiver from someone who is grateful for what you've done for them out of like kindness, like she was saying, how it like really humbles you. And I was like, oh yeah, that is the feeling you feel. And sometimes it can be awkward, but you know, it's like that human connection and interaction where you're not just going throughout your life just taking from people, but like it's more of a wholesome connection, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
But,
And
are you gonna
like,
read something?
yeah. So
Okay.
this is in this is in chapter 2, just above my head. And I love even the like titles of her chapters. They're really dope. And she talks about how she went to college. This was her first time being away from home. She was at this awesome college. She's in class. A lot of people are also Christian, and she knows this white guy is a Christian. And then they talk about infanticide. Basically, is when people who were enslaved, they killed their kids so that they wouldn't have to experience the brute of slavery. And so the guy was just like, oh, she's evil, she's a murderer, she should die. Basically, like, there was no love there was no understanding of her context, understanding of what the things that she went through. And so this is what she said from that experience, because before they kind of they meshed on a spiritual level, at least, because culturally they were really different. She said, his God required a return to enslavement and submission to death. He believed that safety was possible under the yoke of bondage, and he valued obedience over freedom. Yeah. So I think a lot of times, especially being Black and American, Black Christians, it's either we don't think about, or we try not to even articulate the feelings of, you know, the religion that we are professing was used to enslave us. And I feel like she did a good job of it. This is what it was, and we do not worship the same God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that she definitely can have a different perspective on Christianity and faith and spirituality because of the different things that she has gone through and seen and like heard stories of, especially since she was so close to her grandma. Like her whole book is about like being in her grandma's kitchen and or house and like learning about faith through her life. Like it wasn't just from church, it wasn't just from books, it was I don't know, like a generational thing.
Yeah. So, and I think that's so beautiful, because I think a lot of because as a younger person, right, we're like pissed off with like the way things are, and
Mm-hmm.
whether it's society, whether it's our family stuff or spiritual, the things that we care about, if we don't think it's looking like it should look, we're like, burn it, throw it down, right? And I think she does a good job of understanding like the context of like she grew up in a very traditional church, which was very like, you can't wear pants and women can't wear pants, women have to act this way so men can't sin and all this stuff, right? But then she comes to understanding in her adult age where they were trying to protect girls. And what we see now, it's rooted in the patriarchy, obviously, but it was the only way that they felt that they could protect their girls. And as we see every day, particularly Black girls not being able to have their girlhood, not being able to just be a child, being called women at like 15, and being lives taken away, and all of that is kind of the reminder of like, how do we hold these things? Like, obviously there's so much wrong with that, and then the reason why her grandma did that, and the elders and the mothers of the church did that, was they were trying to survive and help the kids survive too.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings it to a space of like, not why did you do this, but I understand why you did this. I'm going to try to create a space where we don't have to do this anymore.
And that's what you're saying the younger generation is doing.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes we want to just burn stuff though, which I completely understand, because there's rage and there's anger and there's like, why are we Why are we continually in the same space? Why is there no progress?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I really like also when she talks about her grandma and when she's younger, she talks about how if anyone has like older parents, or my mom, my aunts and uncles, they would always say, you need to stay out of grown folks' business, right? Like you can be here, but I should not hear you. And so she says that her grandma, instead of praying for her only to know when to be quiet, she also prayed for her to know when to speak up.
Mm.
And I think a lot of times adults tell us to just be quiet, right? They don't ever tell us like, hey, there's a time for you to be quiet. There's a time for you to speak up. And
Yeah.
kind of having that prophetic voice over her life is what she says. And then having that perspective on kids now, because I know it's, as a teacher, sometimes I'd be like, bruh, please stop. I do not want to hear about you missing a sock, right?
Use that mute button.
Yeah, Zoom World, I can't use the mute button right now. But it's also like having them to be empowered enough to speak up when there's something that's making a connection in their head. And so there's a reason for why we do things, but also learning to do things better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's like going off of that on like when to stay silent and when to speak up. That's why we wanted to create a series called Sacred Sounds, because we wanted to have a safe space where we could listen to each other, specifically people of color. Yeah, like people that we maybe are not familiar with, like how we decolonize our faith. And that's why we had Dr. Brandley Woodley. And then people who are also on a womanist journey, like because that is something that's becoming well, for me, like I was sort of exploring feminism, and for some reason I was just like never comfortable with saying like, oh, I'm a feminist. Also, I didn't like do a whole ton of research, but I was just like, on a feeling basis, this doesn't feel quite okay. But then when this like idea of womanist I heard for the first time, I was like, oh yeah, like this is like, Black women, they just do things differently. And I can appreciate that. So that's why we have the Sacred Sounds event, because we want to have a space for people who are not heard as much and are not listened to as much to have this space. And yeah, if anybody would like to come to that, that's what we're promoting here, actually. You can go to zoom.lyricalassembly.com to sign up for that. It's this Saturday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Yeah. And then I guess one more thing that I would want to say, that I guess our generation is starting to do more of people practicing, and she's just talking about being present. She has a whole chapter on being present. She says, as a womanist theologian, I affirm that worship involves our physical bodies being fully present, the lifting of the hands, the tapping of the feet, the standing in affirmation, the shaking of the head, and even the running around the sanctuary. And I think we've gotten so into like this, multicultural, like, oh, worship should look like Bethel Church. And it's just like, sorry if y'all know, like, it does not have to assimilate for it to be authentic worship.
Hell
right?
No.
And so she just talks about how to be radically present of a God that the song embodies. Like, it doesn't have to be a clap. It doesn't have to be reading from a hymn book. If my body feels what I'm hearing and I want to have an expression, because God is in all of this, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not, I shouldn't be putting God in a box. And then I love in the kind of close to where we talked about before with the white God that the basically racist classmate
that white guy.
Yeah, she talks about, I began to embrace the concept of a larger, freer, and more loving God. And I think a lot of times we want to be a part of the God's kingdom that's dominating or has all power, and God is all powerful and God has dominion, but it's not like dominating. He gives us free will. and it should be a loving principle. Like, I should come at you lovingly instead of being like, you're wrong. Let me prove, like, apologetics. Let me prove why you're wrong. So, what? Jesus, what? So it's very, like, disconnected for me. And so I just really like all of the, like, Black history, Black church, and she comes for Black church very eloquently. And it's all facts. Like, it's all, like, you know, we want it to be so close to what whiteness was. We conformed or we assimilated, and that didn't make it right.
Mm-hmm.
And so some things that she says is, like, to be present is to be wherever there is need. So when we see people who are in need, if we see people who feel like their voices have not been heard, we should align ourselves with them. We should amplify their voices, which is also this whole book, Reads for Resistance, is us learning from others in a way that maybe we would never have that conversation with that person, but we can still learn from them, and then figuring out a way of, how does this affect my life? How does this change what I need to be doing? How can I come at this in a very humble way? And we, in our book club, we practice cultural humility, which is different than cultural competency. Cultural competence is basically like, you're different. Yay. Great. Okay. That's awesome. But cultural humility is coming at it like there is a nugget in here that I want to know about. Like, every culture, every different faith has something that is great, and I want to expose myself to this, and I want this to be a part of my life, because I don't think I have all the answers. I do see God in all of you. I see Creator in everything that is happening here. So let me go excavate those things from these people that I normally wouldn't talk to, or I normally don't have friendships with, or I normally aren't around. So apologies for that. And I love this quote in chapter 6. It just says, how will our presence or absence at all, the public spectacles of suffering and injustice, be judged by a God who stands firmly on the side of the oppressed? And so I think a lot of times we try to figure out, like, oh, who was right and who was wrong, and it's like, I need to stand in solidarity with the person who seems like their back is on the wall, and how can I continue to put myself in that space? Let's see. Does anyone have any questions about the book, about the event? What do you need to bring? You just need to bring yourself. You can keep your mic off. You can keep your camera off. We do not mind. If you guys would like to join us for our next book, go ahead and text READS to the number 415-903-7699. We'd love to have you. That's just an open space. We love having new people. And for me, it's so awesome to meet these new people in a pandemic, basically. And it's nice to see everyone. It is early in the morning. It is 9 a.m. on most Saturdays. This Saturday, we will be meeting at 4 p.m. for our event. And then also, if you guys have any questions and maybe you jumped on kind of late or kind of early, you can go ahead and message Lyrical Assembly and with any of your questions. And we would love to hear from you guys. Thank you guys for spending a little bit of your, I guess, Thursday?
Yeah, Thursday
with us. Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks, Shannon. Oh, Ashley. Because
Thanks,
clearly
Ashley.
my name says